Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hello, welcome to the wild, weird, and wonderful podcast that is Hort Culture. We're here today doing wild, weird, and wonderful things.
As always, we're very consistent on that front. We're very, very consistent.
If you're new to the podcast, that'll get you going in the right way. So we just like to talk about plants, things that relate to them, and all their wild, weird, and wonderful things. So that's my new tagline today, which is perfect because we're going to talk about branding. So look at me, I'm branding it. Branding the episode.
You are starting
wild,
out
weird,
strong
and
on track.
Connected it all together.
You are tracking this morning.
Look at that transition. Beautiful.
I know. That's perfect. And the sun is shining. It is a beautiful weather out. It's going to be a warm day. We got just a little rain, but in Kentucky, we hope that we just get incremental rains, perfectly spaced in the spring, which sometimes doesn't happen.
Yeah. Respectful rains, as I like to call them.
Yes.
A respectful rain.
Yes. I don't know. Sometimes rains come and they're very disrespectful. We've had some of those.
Usually the wind is just very disrespectful at my house. You walk outside and
so says the person with high tunnels. Yeah.
Very disrespectful.
There's a completely different take from people that have high tunnels about a Pooh Bear day, kind of a blustery day.
Yes.
You guys don't necessarily like those in the 100-acre wood when you have frames covered with plastic. You don't necessarily like those Pooh Bear days, blustery days. So, yeah. But I do appreciate the warmer weather. It seems like everything is growing so rapidly, and
everything's so green right now.
Yeah, it is.
I love it.
This word is lush. Everything is so lush.
Yeah, the leaves, like it's just like overnight. Like some of the leaves have all come out, and it's like, oh, everything is so green.
I was walking with my son, and he's like, he said the woods are getting shady. And I was like, yeah, there's actually leaves getting on here, bud. He's like, it looks so mysterious. I'm like, yeah.
It's that time of year where you like pass a tree and you're like, is it yellow green because of nutrient deficiency, or is it yellow green because those are new leaves? Yeah. I catch myself going, wait a second. Okay, that's an oak. It just would have leafed out. It's probably fine.
It's fine.
We were talking about that. About like certain ones. I'm like, I'm watching my baby bur oak. Nothing has happened. Are you alive? What's going on? And it's like, oh wait, it's still okay. The walnuts are still like looking dead. They haven't done anything yet. And that's
they're
normal.
Barely starting. Right.
Some things they just don't all come out at the same time. Yeah.
Good for them.
Some of them are late comers to spring. Yeah. resting for spring. But I enjoy all the activities. I have got to get my garden started. I have to carry containers. I've decided to move all of my containers, my large containers that are filled with soil. I've been trying to find a dry time because when it's dry, they're lighter in weight. I need to move all of those up a rather steep hill to a more sunny location. And it's going to be a chore, but it's time. It is time. Not necessarily to plant everything because it's not Derby Day in Kentucky, but we're getting close.
Very close.
We're getting close for common garden crops. So that is my task for sometime this week to try to get that done.
I feel
it is a springtime task.
Well, I mean, this year it feels like you could have planted them almost April 15th. And
yeah, I mean, and I'm afraid my neighbor's going to get ahead of me. We have this tomato war thing going on. And if he gets ahead of me, I mean, I am not going to be happy. I'll just have to go buy one of those little tomato plants that are tiny and already blooming that's in a hanging container. I normally wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Anything to get ahead. Anything to get ahead. But some years, we could have already planted mid-April, but other years in Kentucky. I'm glad we're in the future. We're going to have Matt Dixon on talking about the weather.
That'd be good.
Here on the next episode. I'm really excited about that because I'm not going to place any blame, but I'm like, Matt, is it safe to put my stuff out?
I know. I really want to pull my frost cloth out of everywhere, and I'm like scared to do it because I'm like, I'm going to jinx it. We're going to if I pull it out, we're going to have a frost.
It's good. I mean, we've mentioned this before on the podcast. It's all the winters that we have in Kentucky: blackberry, red bud, and there's these names that we give these late cold snaps. But yeah, we may not be out of the woods just yet. So maybe we want to leave those on for a little bit.
Name that song. Are we out of the woods yet?
Yeah, I like it.
But we're talking about branding today, which we haven't talked about like a marketing topic in a little while. So I'm excited because I always pick up something new from Brett every time we talk about it. But Brett, tell us a little bit about what you and the rest of the CCD team have been up to lately.
Nothing per usual.
Nothing per. It's springtime in Kentucky, so you've not been super busy traveling all over the place.
Anything.
Yeah.
No, we do. We've been doing a good number of things, but one of them that last night we completed the first of this 6-week series. That it's actually the evolution of this project we've had for a while called Marketing for All, which is aiming to meet the needs of people in the intro, beginner to maybe intermediate marketing category, people who are thinking about trying to sell their crops. Because one of the things that we tend to see, maybe you all have experienced this as agents and your experience in the counties, that people are very enthusiastic about growing things. Mm-hmm. They are less enthusiastic about taking the steps necessary to sell the things. And
it's a lot of times. And not maybe giving the proper consideration to the potential market before we grow things. We can often grow things that we may not necessarily have the channels developed yet to sell. So great point. I'm sure that you had lots of good discussion from participants in your latest round of programs. I'm sure about that.
Yeah, well, so it's not unfortunately there's not a field of dreams or market garden or garden of dreams situation where if you grow it they will come. You have to tell them to come and buy the stuff and why they should and why it's good and worth their time and money to do that. And so that's been an ongoing program since 2017, but it's taken different forms. And so this most recent version of it, where my colleagues, Emily and Savannah and Camille, have really taken on more of a leadership role in developing and putting this out. And it's this new version. It used to be that we would do kind of one-off trainings. You want to hear about social media, we'll come out and talk about that. Or you want to hear about pricing at, retail markets. Well, we can talk about that using some price data. This is more of a holistic series where we're actually working through some different topics over 6 weeks with the same people each week. And so it's more of a commitment for them and more of a commitment for us, but it was really, really cool. And so we were talking about what we wanted to maybe talk about on the podcast, and maybe just because it's been on my mind, I said, why don't we talk about this thing that's been on my mind, which is this program. And so there's a number of different modules, and I'm thinking maybe across time we can have some of the other CCD team members come on and talk about some of the different ones. But we opened up the series talking about just this core idea of farm and business branding. The reason why we did that is because it's kind of in an ideal world, it's the defining message, vibe, visual, ethos, value system, etc., upon which all the things that you're going to do, your photographs and your social media and your website, will be built.
Now, wait a minute. I thought you were just selling products. Now we're talking about branding, Brad. That sounds like a lot more work. That sounds like a lot more work.
Not the cattle kind.
Okay.
This is a painless, well, I don't know if it's painless, but it doesn't require heating metal. So but the idea here is that, like, what is the central definition of what your business is? And we were talking before about how, and I stand by this, a lot of marketing, the actual individual steps are very, very simple. I think with gardening, it's kind of similar with, growing plants. A lot of the individual steps are simple. It's just in aggregate, what you're trying to do becomes complex because you have to balance all of them at the same time. There's competing interests. There's limits of memory and energy and interest and all the other things associated with that. But I was thinking about your marketing plan and our approach to Marketing for All. It's sort of like, do we have any Power Rangers fans in the house?
Everybody likes the red one now.
Okay, well.
I mean, not everybody.
Did you not pretend you were a Power Ranger on the playground when you were in elementary school?
Power Ranger for Halloween?
Yes. Multiple times.
Many times. What was your color?
Okay, but what color were you?
I was the Green Ranger, and then I was the White Ranger.
Look at you.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm a bit special. Not like one of
Apparently,
the four
that was a
basic
very,
ones. I'm more of like,
very strong marketing for Power Rangers. I mean, we're bringing it back up. It's still on our mind, in our mind space.
Power Rangers.
Bringing it back, man.
But the marketing plan is like, so each individual component is sort of like the Zords that each of them had. And then the marketing plan itself is the Megazord when it all comes together.
Right. Okay.
It's, this newer audiences would maybe, associate something with like a Gundam, from Japanese,
anime type.
Media.
Yeah.
So think
like
of it
the
as,
A-Team. You love it when a plan comes together, for those
or
of you.
Transformer or something like that. Yes, I don't know. Transformer is not, it's kind of a stretch. I feel like the Zord is really the core, that there's all these components, but the whole idea of your brand is what that Megazord is supposed to look like when all those pieces go together, because you can theoretically assemble them in all different kinds of ways. And this is where the metaphor breaks down. But
so a brand is more than just what you're selling. It's more than just a product. Is that what you're saying here?
It is, and it should inform everything that you're doing after that. That's the key step, because sometimes people will sort of think, okay, I know I have to do social media, so I'm just going to go, quote, do social media, or I need to have a website, so I'm just going to go have a website. And to me, the brand, thinking about your branding, while it's sometimes the most abstract or the most difficult to consider, it's worthwhile to spend some time thinking about what makes you, your product, and your business unique and special. And some of that is self-reflection of, like, for instance, our podcast, as Alexis said, has a brand. Part of that's based on who we are as people, that we're both kind of nerdy, we're friends, we think we're funny, and some subset of our
That's what I was going to say. we
audience
think
thinks that. But we're also more interested, I think, in trying to have a podcast feel to the podcast than just being a straight ahead, promoting the university or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that was very intentional to how we developed this and how we approach it and how we bring on guests and talk with them. And we get feedback from guests saying, I didn't know what to expect, and I'd never been on a podcast like that before. And that is really rewarding for us. So, I mean, all that to say that there is some aspects that you are going to need to reflect on who you are and what you're doing. Just be, honest about your nature. And then some of it can be intentional, that you want to create a association of your product being family friendly, or you want to create an association of your product being particularly healthy, or your product, that maybe your approach to pesticides is something that you want to communicate in your brand. And so, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people struggle with this, or it feels frustrating. But it really is going to determine what it is that you take pictures of, what it is that you create posts about, what it is how it is that you feature. Are you a bright and sparkly personality, and you want that to come through, or are you more of a efficient, less less touchy-feely person, and you're more keeping your focus more on your product attributes or something like that? Well, a website for those two brands could look radically different. And so that's I would say why this is important and why we started there.
It's almost like and I'm sure there's to develop that. I mean, do you ever work with folks, Brett, you and the CCD team, that they have to really that they don't really know what their brand identity is, and they've never really thought about it in those terms? Do you run into a lot of people that they have the growing experience, but they have really never sat down and done a storyboard on who they are, and what they're all about?
Yes.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, you mentioned earlier that, and I run into people that are really passionate about growing, but I had a feeling that you guys probably worked with a lot of people that sometimes they may not know what their brand is.
Well, yeah, and part of it too is that there are people who come to this world from, I was in marketing, or I worked in retail and decided I wanted to get out and get into farming. And so they're figuring out how to grow plants, or how to grow, how to have livestock, or how to, do that stuff. Then there are other people who come to it from, I really want to grow plants, and my hobby has become a habit. that I have to continue feeding through some sort of income. So how do I get people to give me money for this with as little work as possible? That's kind of the orientation
I like that a lot. Yeah.
And then most people fall somewhere in the middle between those two things. And so, yes, when you come and talk to someone like my colleague Emily, or someone like me, or someone like Alexis, who have thought about this, or in some ways and we are on a spectrum of how natural it is for us versus how, intentional or how much you have to turn it into an exercise. Some people are just naturally creative in that way, in the same way that some people are naturally seem to have a green thumb. They just sort of have a connection to the plant in a way that, I don't know, but I think a lot of this stuff can be learned, but it's intimidating if all you've ever experienced is that marketing is something that's natural that people do. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example. If I just ask you, what is your brand? That's kind of an intimidating big question. But we have, like, for instance, as part of this this presentation and this program that our team puts on, this idea of this brand builder worksheet that we have people complete. And so we ask them that if you're thinking about your brand and you had to put it on a spectrum between these two variables that I'm going to give you, where would it fall on that? Is it kind of all the way one way, all the way to the other, somewhere in the middle? So on the spectrum between personable and professional, where's your brand? Those things aren't mutually exclusive, but
it's the spectrum.
There's a spectrum.
Yeah.
When you have that conversation, Brett, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was real curious. When you have that conversation, do you also have the conversation at the same time, the audience and what they may or may not expect? I mean, is this at the point where that would be the discussion, or no?
It is. So I think there's two levels to that. One, I would always encourage you to have your customers in mind, but in other cases, it's kind of like, let's just clearly define what it is that you're trying to put out in the world first, and then ask, is that what your customers want?
Gotcha.
So, and again, this is an example from my professional life, not from any of the business stuff that I've done in the past. In the extension world, I would say the Center for Crop Diversification, really leans in on the personable side of the equation here. And that is in part because we're coming from an institution that is already kind of like professional / maybe stuffy / official. We don't have to necessarily. We're with Extension. It's like we're established. And so what we want to do is show that there's real people with real personalities who are here. It could be on the flip side, and this is something that, talking with growers, if you are new to this world of selling produce, for instance, you may want to lean in on the professional side to emphasize the quality of the product that you're putting out there, that we're not just a plucky upstart, young woman farmer who's trying to just be funny and zany. We're actually like professional, and yes, we are those other things, but this is kind of what we're trying to emphasize. And again, it has a different effect when I take a goofy selfie of like, I'm out here on Extension, and people are like into that, versus if someone who's trying to maybe strive for a little more respect or something that they feel like they want to push. That's a difference. So a couple of the other variable spectra endpoints: spontaneous versus strategic, modern versus classic, cutting edge versus traditional, fun versus serious, and accessible to all versus upscale. And so these are all like, and we don't have to, talk about any of them in particular.
It's like a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah, it just starts to frame it. And some people will be like, well, I don't think that, spontaneous and strategic are really, endpoints. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is not like this thing is real. This is just a framework for you to start to think about, well, I'm not what would be like Wells Fargo level of serious. Like that's one end of a spectrum. But I'm also not Chuck E. Cheese level of fun. You're somewhere in the middle. It's just a structure to think about, and that there are real differences in the way that those brands operate and communicate their message.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we build into some of these other things of, like, I give the example of photography. What might a selfie look like from a brand that is trying to be spontaneous versus one that's trying to be strategic, or one that's trying to be fun versus one that's trying to be serious? What might that look like? But
Does it
Ray,
have to look the same across all platforms, Brett? This is something I've been super interested in. Like, there's so many platforms to get the word out, but it seems like that certain platforms themselves have their kind of expectation, and certain platforms are more zany or more spontaneous, where other platforms may be more serious, like a traditional website versus like an Instagram or whatever, a TikTok. I mean, does that play into any of this? I know, and I'm guessing that you need to be sort of on certain points at a certain level. You need to be sort of consistent about your branding, but at the same time, I mean, maybe that's a question for another person, or does that play in here about the
Yeah. Well,
platform?
I'm curious what other, if the fellow Pod Squad members have thoughts on that.
Yeah. Because there's so many avenues now. There's
So
so
you're
many
kind of saying
ways.
maybe there's certain formats or even certain wrinkles within platforms or within approaches
Yeah,
where
under this
you show
whole
one side versus
yeah,
others.
exactly. And
I can,
under this whole
yeah.
thing, that's my question, I guess. The different platforms and being consistent. And
what do you think, Jessica?
I was gonna say I could see like a difference with that, like just myself personally when I think about that. Like, I feel like TikTok is more your laid back play around. Yeah, Brett, whatever you're doing over there.
Yeah, for that.
And Facebook and like Instagram's like in between.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe.
Very
And
visual
then
still.
Facebook is like more your formal, not really formal, right? Then you get to like your website, kind of like
Yeah, you can.
Ray
Yeah.
was saying. Like you could kind of went backwards with that versus,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how I view it as that definitely like TikTok is more of you're gonna see funny videos. And they're, not all of
Spontaneity.
them are, some of them are like how to, and like this is what we
Yeah.
do every day. Come with us on the farm. But you end up seeing a lot more I think that like spontaneity stuff,
Yeah.
like Alexis
And I
just
think the
said.
time, like how long those things are accessible to people. So, like I'm going to put more, whether it's, Facebook or Instagram, more spontaneous and probably more personable, more high energy things, fun stuff on like my stories that are going to disappear within 24 hours and that are just kind of like catching attention, showing, in the moment.
In the moment,
versus
yeah.
an actual post is going to be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more thought out because I'm not doing it as often. In theory, it's living there forever versus, even like an email listserv. You've got, mine's probably going to be a little bit, I don't know if it would, it's going to be more personable in that I'm going to go more in depth with people. I'm not trying to just do like a quick little one-off caption, but I'm going to talk more about the farm. So it's personable in that way, but I think the voice is a slightly more professional, if that makes sense. Somehow it's both, but it is very different, I think, than a one-off thing on social media. So I think that there's even within the same place different ways to use them, and you can I think that's cool. I think that's a benefit that people can, who maybe are struggling with, are they more professional or are they more personable? Well, there's the ability to kind of be both now on some of these platforms where you can show people a little bit more of like, daily life of being a farmer, and maybe you've got kids running around and petting the new baby cows or whatever that is. But then those kind of things that live forever maybe is a little bit more strategic on like your Mother's Day offerings or things along those lines.
Yeah, just I wondered about like the branding and the consistency, knowing and having a feeling that there was a difference in the platforms. That's a good point you guys made, that some platforms are more permanent. The information is, the links are, and some are just for a period of time and then they're gone. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I would separate. There are some core components of a brand, things like your logo, your general color scheme, or like area of the color vibe, like in the pastels versus the neons versus the earth tones versus the deep classical blues and golds or something like that, dark greens, something like that. And so like those things, I think there are opportunities for consistency across platforms and across, and those are the least dynamic of all the content that you're going to be doing. Like, you might change your logo a few times in the course of your brand. Some people never will. Compare that to something like Alexis was talking about with it's like let's see, what would you say? Like semi-transient, maybe, semi-permanent, like things like a email a marketing email, or a post that's going to sit in your grid or on your Instagram or something along those lines, or even like dynamic blog content on a website, versus the truly like ephemeral stuff. That's the stories, the Snapchats, the TikToks. I guess not the TikToks, but and I think part of that is the nature of the content, but also part of that is the fact that different customer segments are going to interact with the different things that you do. So like your casual customers are going to maybe see your Instagram posts, and they're going to see like your homepage of your website maybe, and they'll see you maybe in person if you have signage or if you have these other things. Whereas your super fans are going to see every one of your stories, and they're going to read every one of your emails, and that might be an opportunity. Like they're very into you. Is what I'm trying to say.
They're going to be the ones that actually comment or like your posts and your photos.
They're probably your bigger buyers a lot of the time, or at least they're sharing
consistent buyers
consistently.
And if they're interacting with that, then there's a chance that they're more interested in the in-depth brand story, the blooper reel, the not just the kind of, basic platform of who you are and what you're doing. And so I think that, to me, that's a big part of it too, is just understanding that you have these, we talk about knowing what our customers want, but in reality, most of our vendors sell to people who are a casual a couple of times a year. They sell to some people every single week. They sell to some people who would be very willing to go forth and tell their friends and family about it. And so and then you have a whole other group of people that are just lurking, waiting for that first purchase, familiarizing themselves with you. And so that's this thing we talk about in this course.
And all direct to consumer within the scope of, I'm assuming today we're mostly talking about direct to consumer, because something like a co-op, the marketing would look different there. But direct to consumer, it sounds like it's just a lot more dynamic, and you have to make more effort because you're literally direct to consumer, a direct feed, direct line. So, okay.
Yeah. And you're like, this is something we talked about a little bit I talked about it even just last night, was that you have to remember that some, all of the platforms that you're using, Instagram, Facebook, websites, email, all of that stuff, those are platforms that are also used by like multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations that have entire marketing teams. And so your approach, this is something that we used to be like, that people would sort of give talks about how to like follow the lead of Coca-Cola. And it's like, you're just a very different type of business. Your messaging will likely be very different, and your amount of time that you're able to put in might be different. And so you may emphasize things differently. You may lean more on email, or you may think, but I think leaning into the direct to consumer space, leaning into some of the aspects of story and personal identity and differentiation are a key piece. And so one of the things that we talk about is that, like, this brand and how you're doing this messaging should be like a strategic goal oriented conversation. So asking the question of like, what do I want to be known for? And also in my particular segment, what is there, like, what are the opportunities that I have to stand out? So there's, what do I want, but also where's the opportunity in the marketplace? Right. And so I think that there's some really interesting conversations to be had about what that looks like, because sometimes we think about, farmers markets, for instance, all the vendors have like a certain sameness to them. But if you have an opportunity to kind of stand out for one reason or another, either through product or through production practices or some other aspect of messaging, what does that look like?
There's a perfect cartoon for this. I hate to say it, but it's tracking so closely to our conversation. There's an episode of Big City Greens. If any of you guys have ever watched Big City Greens, it was the Green family had a small direct-to-consumer market, and they sold at the farmer's market. Well, local Whole Foods decided to sell at the farmer's market, and there was this whole piece of trying to get to the top of people's mindset. And it was really, it was about marketing and who they really were. And people made the final choice, in this little cartoon. But I encourage anyone that has access to it, go look that episode up where they sell at the farmer's market. But it was all about marketing and knowing who you are, what your product is, and who you're selling to. It's kind of what you were saying. It's really cool. And it made me think here, I'm trying to watch a kids program thinking, oh, marketing, farmers market, direct to consumer. I'm having some of these thoughts that you're talking about. It's so cool.
Yeah. It's another thing we talk about. I'm curious what you all think about this. So a lot of the stuff that we preach as far as how to do your marketing is very logical. It's very plan oriented. It kind of breaks it into nuts and bolts rather than it being this magical artistic progress or project where you come out with something that's really, really good. And it's much more boring than that. Almost all good marketing is way more boring and way more work than that. It's just like a good production system. Like,
is it
as much
as
a
framework, like a deliberate framework. Is that what you're saying? Kind of.
Yeah.
And like, so in woodworking, you'll see a piece of furniture and be like, I have no idea how you made that. And then someone shows you like, these are the steps for how to do it. And you're like, oh, okay. And the way that people say is that everything's easy once you know how. And that's what we're trying to do with marketing, is demystify it down to some actual concrete steps. However, marketing is also, especially in the direct-to-consumer space, is highly emotional for the consumer in particular. And so I'm curious, for the people that you all interact with, your all's own businesses, your all's own experiences, what do you see as some of the emotional levers that a lot of producers in that local space can pull in the customer? Like, what is it, the associations, the thoughts, the dreams, the aspirations? What do you think has a lot of purchase in this space?
Before we even get to that space, I'll mention a space that was very interesting to me, a couple markets that I've worked with over time. And they were very interesting because it was a newer market. I transferred counties in Kentucky and went into a county, and it had a farmer's market. And as we were thinking about marketing, promoting the market, it was interesting. It quickly became clear to me that was a market based on price. You had to be the lowest price, or people were not interested. They would go to where the lowest price was. And I thought, well, how does that impact marketing? It was not an emotional purchase. It was not an experience market. It was not a social experience. It was a market just on one thing, and that was price. And that seemed to be different to me than more of an experience market. And that was one of my hardest lessons early on in my career, that not all markets are the same. And I don't know if those markets out there still exist like that are just strictly, people ask one question. They don't care who grew the tomato and how pretty and fluffy the calf was. They want to know the price, and that is it. And that feels different to me to this very day. That feels different. But now I realize that a lot of markets, and my market I currently work with, it's all the things that we're talking about today. But I guess knowing that up front, it was really important for me. Going forward into the conversation.
And like what you're selling, right? So flowers are probably not going to do great at a market that's focused on price, because they are not a necessary,
like an essential ingredient.
An essential ingredient. Yeah. And even like, maybe something like honey or jams and jellies or salsas, they're not, probably a little bit more than flowers, because at least they're edible, but they're probably not going to be the same as someone who's wanting to go and can and get, a couple bushels of corn.
You're not going to get what they're actually worth at those markets, right? Like those products are probably valued a lot higher, but they're not going to be able to sell them at those price.
You're not probably growing a bunch of like heirloom, right? It's not the story behind them. That's what you're saying. It's the product itself. Like they've got to fill the
what
fridge.
Brett said earlier. Here's why. If you're at a market that does value that link, direct to consumer link, and values the family values and the family marketing, that's worth something. There's you can assign a dollar value to that, and it's interesting. And we've had conversations on here before about like urban markets versus rural markets and some of the differences. I mean, does that play into this marketing thing too, Brett?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think you all are bringing up great points, and I think it pokes holes in some of the fantastical thinking that goes on in local food systems a lot, which is that every market wants to meet the cow before the hamburger, and every customer wants to know about you and your children or your journey or whatever. And there are people who do, and I think that there are people who don't. And honestly, there's times where there are people who are so we talk about it in our presentation sometimes about this idea of a spectrum from a price market, like what you're talking about, Ray, to a credence market, which is a market that cares about essentially credence attributes or some other secondary aspect of the product. I jokingly say that my mom would say that the people who shop at credence markets have more money than sense. And that they're more likely to buy a quart of blackberry jam than they are to buy a gallon of blackberries and make jam themselves. They're more likely to buy a couple of ears of sweet corn to grill for their dinner party than they are to buy 12 dozen ears to can. And so it's just a different kind of space. And some of the heartache that we see in the local food space is being in a price market and deluding yourself or wishing you were in a credence market.
I mean, I'm sure you could make a movement given enough time and marketing. What if I was always curious, what if I'd have stayed in that county longer and we'd made some inroads to say, well, this is why you should purchase here, even though this is $1 more, this whatever the product is. I mean, I guess given enough time, you might be able to make some movement there on those markets to get the true value.
Yeah.
Consumer values. Yeah.
Kind of on topic with this is interesting. It just got me thinking about selling at markets, for a market, the different types of customers that all visit one market and how they change throughout the day. Because, I've witnessed you get your people who show up before the market opens, right? You're trying to set up and they're already there.
Looking for those doorbusters.
They want the best. They want the best product, right? They want to get it first. They want the best.
They don't want that sweet corn to sit out in the sun.
And they're probably paying the highest price, right? And then you have people who are coming mid-market, a lot of families and stuff are coming around that time. Yeah. Sometimes it's just like a social thing. They're coming and they're usually like okay with whatever the prices are, and they're not getting, they're still getting pristine products, right? But not as the early people. And then you have the people who come in at the very end of the day. And a lot of times they're the ones who are hoping to like bargain you down, haggle you, right?
So and even really, that's interesting.
So it's really interesting to see, because you'll find you don't have as many people want to haggle you down with prices like early on in the morning, versus as it gets later in the day, you'll have certain groups of people who are like, oh, I see you have so much of this left. You don't want to take that home with you, right? Can we make a deal? And sometimes that happens because you don't want to take all that extra product home with you.
What does that do from a marketing standpoint, though? And this is a really interesting conversation and a good point you brought up, Jessica, that customers change throughout the day. And there's those that'll come at the very last minute hoping to get that bushel of green beans like super cheap. But how does that impact from a marketing standpoint the perceived value of your product if you start selling things really cheap at the end of the day? Are all of your customers going to shift? I mean, I'm sure that plays into marketing. Now we're getting into real subtle things, I realize, Brett, on marketing.
I'm not into dropping prices when the stuff's at the end of the day, personally. Yeah. In that type of a format. Because you are committing so much time and energy to get to a market to command a high premium that to just undercut yourself just for the sake of, for some reason, and I don't say for some reason, there is a weird fixation that people have with not taking anything home from the market.
Oh yeah, I know. Right. You have nailed it. Absolutely.
I know it's inconvenient. Yeah. I understand, but to me, if I can take home 5% of what I brought, that means my pricing is probably somewhere in the ballpark, or my volume is somewhere in the ballpark. If I'm selling out by 9 a.m., then I'm not growing enough or I'm not charging enough.
Yeah.
The same way, if I never have anyone say anything about my pricing, I'm probably like that it's too high. I'm probably underpricing. I understand we don't want friction. I'm not trying to tell you to gouge people, but Brett showed up with dollar signs in his eyes and told us we should gouge our neighbors. No, I'm not saying that, but it's actually pretty expensive to spend that much time and energy to grow things and to deliver them. So I thought maybe we could end with just like two different. You all gave me some ideas. This is spontaneous, so if it sucks, it's Alexis's fault.
Yeah,
but
100%, 100%.
I was thinking about so spontaneous.
Alexis spontaneous. So two maybe like archetypes or two fictional case studies of two people who would have very different brands, and then just some basic ideas for how those might play out in other aspects of their marketing. So on the one hand, we have someone who's selling into a price market. They are not a particularly bubbly personality. They're good at growing stuff. They want to sell it. They want to move it. And they sell based on quality and based on, relative affordability. We have another person who, and this is just a completely made up, fabricated thing. They are a talented, beautiful flower farmer located somewhere in, I don't know, central Kentucky. And they are living the dream that many of the people who follow them think they would like to live. They sell their products to these people, some of whom have higher incomes and who have a value that they place on local food systems or on local horticultural products and other products like that. How might those two people brand differently and then create content that would look different? So
you mean in keeping with their philosophy that you just working in the box that you just threw out for each.
Exactly. So I'm imagining I'll take on, for some reason I feel drawn to the role of crusty, non-bubbly farmer. I would say my customers still do care and have an emotional attachment to the products, even though they're just price. If you were just price, you would go and get, bulk frozen vegetables or canned vegetables from someplace. There is something about the quality of the product, whether that be nostalgic, whether that be high standards based on their upbringing, whatever. But I would still be looking to do some marketing, because all of these people, regardless of their price shoppers or if they're value shoppers, they are on some sort of social media or some sort of platform somewhere that you can communicate with them. So if I were that person, I would be taking pictures of my products that communicated the quality, particularly communicated the availability.
Yeah,
that, sweet corn is going to be available this weekend. And I would try to communicate that probably through a blend of email, some Facebook and social media, and maybe I have a website, maybe I don't. And maybe even I have a text list, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, because that's what my customers care about. They care that it's a high quality product. They want to know when and where to buy it. And that's it.
And you could really take advantage of the fact that you probably have a customer contact list, whereas the local supermarket doesn't. And you could take that as a direct IV into their brain space, as far as, like you said, the nuts and bolts. What do I have? Here's actual pictures of it, and here's how you can get it and where you can get it. Like very functional, straightforward kind of info.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I would say part of that is I know I'm going to sell the product at a lower price as compared to somebody who's in, a more bougie market with people who want to buy some story. As a result, I'm going to want to spend less time on my marketing, because time is money. And so if all you want is a high quality product delivered at a good price, then I'm just going to communicate to you the bare minimal details. And I'm not trying to upcharge you, but I'm also not trying to wine and dine you either. Like, this is a communication here, and that is great. That is amazing. Yeah. And it would still be beneficial to do that level of marketing.
I think the consistency and the frequency be super important there. And you mentioned that your consistency and your schedules are paramount. I mean, being super consistent about getting the word out on a regular basis when products available. Yeah.
If you jump to the other end of the spectrum, our idealized flower farmer who is doing it all, Well, that's a different type of marketing, a different type of messaging, different, aspects of communication.
Some more emotions involved in that, maybe.
I think there is storytelling about what the brand is, who the people are. There's people who maybe they're not just consuming the product. In that first scenario, you ask the person, well, what are you buying? It's like, well, I'm buying the corn. What do you think I'm buying? In reality, when we buy these other things that have these credence attributes, that have these associated stories, you're really buying more than just the product itself. You're buying the story.
You're buying a story, and with some of these things like that are higher value. So even like a jam or jelly, something that you're going to use for a while. It's not just you're eating that tomato during a meal and that's, done. I mean, that's an experience in itself, but you're looking at maybe a week worth of experience. And so sort of like the good vibes it brings all week long, right? You're selling an emotional experience as well. Like, having flowers in your house will might make you feel like you have your act together more, right? Like seeing a fresh vase of something, using some, local honey on your biscuits in the morning is going to make you feel like you are helping the environment and helping the bees, right? Every time you use them, you're going to think about the bees. And so you're selling.
Yeah. You're going to think about that vendor too every time because like you said, you're going to keep that product longer. You're going to see it in a jar or those flowers lasting.
Right. And so you've got to market the experience of, even if it's a week at a time, you've got to market this is how you're going to feel as you enjoy this product.
Are they going to want to see your face in that marketing scenario, like a personal connection?
Usually if you're selling, I have seen, if you're selling an experience, they want to know like the full gambit of it, right? They want to know who those people are behind the experience that's they're having. And I think, price people maybe, again, don't care as much, but you could post occasionally with you in it just so that they recognize you maybe when they're at market. So either your logo is something that's consistently there so that they recognize that on your table, or, your face. Or I've had people say like, I recognized it was you because I saw your corgis and I recognized your corgis. And so it's the same. If you're uncomfortable with your personal face, have something that is part of your brand, whether it's a logo or not, that it's consistently popping up.
So can I ask you, so you sort of laid out a very nice picture of the types of things that you want to communicate. What do you, in the same way that I said, you're sending an email that says this, taking a picture that says this, and maybe posting it to Facebook, and otherwise for my farmer A, for farmer B, what might be some of those nuts and bolts things that you're going to do or use, the platforms or the formats that you might use to communicate this other story about the, Jessica, you said the vendor or in that relationship or the benefits. How might you do that?
Are you saying like what types of photos you post, or I guess
pretend I'm not as smart as you, and it shouldn't take much. And like if you were going to give me a checklist of things to do.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say that you've got, your honey is about to be ready and you're going to take it to market for the first time. The week of that you're going to take it to market, or, the week before leading up to it, you may start posting about that, we harvested from the hives, or, you may, if
posting
you're
where?
Posting on your social medias. You could also be sending it in your email. Hey, same idea of like, we're going to have honey this week, but putting more of the story behind, like, here's a picture. I'm going to use Jessica as an example of our little boy in his bee suit helping harvest the honey this season, or whatever it is. And, could be the same with flowers, like showing a photo of they went in the ground 2 months ago. This is what they look like. And look, here's the very first bloom 2 months later. Here's the corgi sitting beside the plant. Look how big it is, like a growth, the story of that product coming to you. So you're putting a lot more in, but it could be email, it could be social media, where I think knowing where you find your customers is important. So people who are maybe buying on price are, I would say a lot of them tend to be a little bit of an older crowd, at least like right now in my experience. They're more likely to be on Facebook than they're going to be on Instagram or TikTok. So versus if you're marketing to weddings and you're wanting, younger couples maybe who are getting married, plus you're selling a visual product, you're probably going to post on Instagram because it's a visual platform and it's a younger generation. So I think also if you're overwhelmed by, do I need to do email and TikTok and Instagram? Well, where are your customers? What is the customer demographic and what do they use? Do they do Facebook at all? Do you just need to send an email? Just be like, hey, we'll be at the market this weekend. That might be enough. So like, don't overwhelm yourself with where to go too. That's a little off topic, but
in all of this, the email seems to be the golden ticket, a consistent thread that people still actually use. Is that true?
I do think that email is like the most, in my experience and interactions with producers in Kentucky, it is the most underutilized marketing channel that I come across. It's not a panacea for everything. It doesn't, if you don't have a customer base, it's really hard to create a customer base just with email. Like you have to find a way to get them to give you your email.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the thing. As I think people are overwhelmed by the amount of emails they get. Raise your hand, everybody on this podcast. And so sometimes it can be intimidating not intimidating, but like, God, I don't want another email. But if you have sold them into your story and they found you somehow, maybe it is on social media, maybe it's just visiting you every week at market, they think of you more like a friend, so they want to get your emails versus like the random emails they get from box stores type thing. So there is like a relationship building to even get to that step, I think.
Yeah. A transition.
And even if they don't open it, seeing the subject line and having this positive association with you, and they're like, I don't got time for that, but I love, Farm ABC.
I love corgis.
Yeah.
And next time I see you at the market, I'm going to be like, oh, I love your emails, even though I never open
even though I'm going to ask you the question that was in the
those.
email because I didn't actually read it.
I like emails, and you guys just hit on something. I like emails because you can get metrics from that. You can get feedback, empirically on how effective you are and how many people open
did they
when
click
they open.
the link?
Yes.
Did the story that you told encourage them to actually
some
click
feedback.
the link?
You can get that on social media as well, but email is so robust. It's like the new website because email is so interactive and can have so many elements now. And, there's all these ways to attach pictures easily or PDF it or whatever. Email's pretty robust. And it's a direct line.
Right. If you were to give people maybe listening who are wanting to up their game, they could be at any stage in their marketing, but they want to improve this year in some scope. What's like top 3 maybe, or even top 2 things that you would say like focus in on?
I think one thing I would say is as you consider who you are as a brand or what the important parts of what you're doing, think about the ways that a core number of images, photos that you can capture today or this week or throughout the season. Imagery is one of the primary currencies of modern marketing, particularly social media, but also other formats. So that's one like achievable thing. Take some pictures of yourself, of your product, of your space, of your marketing location, retail, whatever location it is, and have those on hand for use in one thing or another. I think another thing that I would say is if you're feeling overwhelmed, try to take whatever the thing is you're feeling overwhelmed about and break it down into simpler steps, simpler processes. So for instance, there's people who say, Facebook just kind of overwhelms me. It's just kind of like, well, I would rather see you consistently post 1 to 3 things per week on your social media than post 10 days in a row and then go dormant for the rest of the season.
Consistency.
And one thing that you can do with that, I think to break it down is to identify like types of posts that you want to create. And let's just start with 2. So one is something about your brand. It's sort of an educational / informational piece. And then another that is about some sort of product that you're selling. Those are 2 types of posts that you can do. And if you shoot to have one of each of those per week for the next, 6 months, and if you're not selling year round, then maybe that changes. I think that would be a positive thing. The other thing I would say, just to kind of reflect back on our archetypes. So if person 1 is spending less time on their marketing, but their price is lower, person 2 is spending a lot more time on their marketing, but they're doing that only because their price is higher as a result. And it's a trade-off. Marketing takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it often takes money. The suggestion would be to spend as much as 10% of your overall budget on marketing. And so for some people, it's much higher. Some industries, it's much higher than that. People don't like to hear that because they like to buy seeds and plants and that kind of thing. And I
if you like to do that and the idea of marketing is horrendous to you, I will go back to what I have said multiple times is find you a youngin' and pay them per post. Maybe it's $10 per post. It's something a little bit easier. You've got to guide them. And there is, if you're not a writer, there are, some AI things where you can type in, this is the general stuff I want to know. And you can type that in and they can polish that for you. I'm not against it. If it gets you marketing, then go do it. But you can then, send that to a kid or have them do it themselves. I say a kid, at this stage, they could be probably 5 doing this, but, send that to a high schooler that who can do that posting for you and will remind you that it needs to be done. And then it's a very minimal cost for them. It's a fun, easy way to earn a little bit of cash. So, export those things that you can't do well. I'm all about that, and focus on what you can do, that you do well, and do more of it. So if you've got more questions on branding, on marketing, on websites, anything that kind of you've grown it and now what do you do with it? If you're looking for that, we have some really great resources on the CCD website. So we'll post that in the show notes. You can also contact us via our Hort podcast email, or horticulture email, or you can reach out directly to anybody on the Center for Crop Diversification team. If you've got really specific questions, you just want to go ahead right to Brett and ask. Feel free to always do that, and we'll get you on the right route and get you some information there. But we are glad that you were here with us, and we hope that you will join us next time. Thanks for being here.